AC, it is October. This is the perfect month to be doing Son of Hammerland. We are coming towards the end of spooky season, and we're going to be talking about one of the great, I think, horror film titles of all time, Twins of Evil from
Even if
1971.
it's a little misleading because not both of our twins are in fact evil. In fact, one of them is not evil at all.
No, but like for some reason I thought Hammer was kind of above this, but they do that thing in the middle of the movie where someone shouts the title.
Oh my gosh.
They are
Not
twins
just
of evil.
not just someone, Peter Cushing, and you're kind of like, wait, why did you even say that?
Well, there's a lot to get into with this. This is actually a sequel of sorts to the first Son of Hammerland episode we did all the way back in January, where we talked about the vampire lovers. Now we're talking about Twins of Evil. I understand that there's actually a trilogy. There was a middle film, is that right? And why did we not talk about that? We're doing Quatermass all over again.
We did. And the same reason is that I don't think the middle. Well, actually, Quatermass 2 is actually pretty good. I just think that Lust for Vampire is a steep drop off from Vampire Lovers, and then you have to climb back up to get to Twins of Evil. And I said, well, why don't we just bridge the chasm, and we'll get back to Lust for a Vampire at some point. And actually, Vampire Circus also takes place in the Karnstein universe as well. So I think we're touching on that in December, or I think it's December or November.
Okay. So in that in between film, like how is the continuity here? I know we've got
continuity.
Well, I mean, there's at least a recurrence, because I know we've got, as you mentioned, the Karnstein family, this family of vampires, and Merkala, who we saw as the villain in The Vampire Lovers, makes an appearance here, but in almost a different kind of context from what I remember. Yeah, so let's, I guess.
Well, and that character of Carmilla is also in Lust for Vampire, but she's blonde. Well, it's either Carmilla or Merkala or Merkalala. But it's played by Jut Stensgaard in Lust for Vampire, and it is ostensibly the same character, but she looks nothing like Ingrid Pitt. And then we have Merkala here, who is revived almost purely for the purpose of vampirizing our count.
Yeah, and it's been a while since I watched The Vampire Lover, so they make a big deal of, I think, showing Merkala's name as if I'm supposed to know who that is, and I was supposed to know who that is.
Right.
And it wasn't until looking this up on Wikipedia right before we jumped on, I'm like, that's right. That's where I know that. I'm on board now. I get it. Right. So now that we've set the table as to where Twins of Evil fits into this trilogy, let's talk about what Twins of Evil is actually about. We've already established it's not about twins of evil, but a twin of evil doesn't sell tickets. That sounds just too weird.
That's true. One of these is evil, the other is not. Yes, we have the third, and it is, some would argue that this is a worthy successor to Vampire Lovers. It's directed by John Huff and scripted by Tudor Gates, who had also done the Vampire Lovers. And this one opposes a puritanical witch hunter played by Peter Cushing in one of his darkest roles, and the Satan-worshipping Count Karnstein played by Damian Thomas. And they're battling over the fate of two gorgeous twins who have recently come to reside under Gustav Weil's roof, which is Peter Cushing's character. And those two twins are played by Playboy centerfolds Madeleine and Mary Collinson.
And they were in the story, in the film, I think they just turned 19 years old. I don't know if they were. That seems to be about the right age, like they were playing.
Yes.
Yeah. But these twins,
yes.
I hate to say this. This movie, it did a lot of things to my brain. First of all, it made me hypothesize. I don't know, the idea of like the sexy twins was probably a staple or a theme in pop culture, but I feel like I could set this down as the lightning rod movie, because these two actresses are just so, appealing. They're easy on the eyes, as you might say, but also they play their roles so well. You've got the good twin and the bad twin, but they're both equally compelling in their goodness and their badness. And the other bit is, you know, Hammer had started off as, kind of very classy in its horror, but then as we're getting into the 70s, as we had kind of discussed, they were getting a lot uh, more of a penchant to show skin.
Mhm.
And in this movie, these the twins, they're constantly shot from an angle of, leaning over in their gowns, and like there's not a whole lot to the imagination, but it's the definition of a cinematic tease.
Mhm.
And then at the very end, by the time you're like, okay, I get it. How many more down the gown shots can we get? We're not going to see anything. Then all of a sudden we're seeing everything with
Yeah.
Frieda, the bad twin. And it's such a, I'm not going to say it's off-putting, but I wasn't quite expecting it. It threw me for a loop.
I was actually thinking the same thing. I was watching this like, wait, isn't there? I'm pretty confident there's nudity in this one. And then yes, we do finally get some steak for all the sizzle we've had. And I
Is
like
that a
the
vampire movie pun?
I like the fact that it was Freda as well. That we're still going to keep Maria nice and virginal, but Freda can show us the goods.
And I think that I'm not in the heads of the screenwriter, but it seems like thematically that that holds true.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, but so there's the Karnstein, who's a baron, I think. He lives in the castle, and he's a completely debauched figure who's got all these kind of sycophants working for him. Contrast that with Mr. Weil. I like because Gustav Weil, if you
Mm-hmm.
look at it, it looks like Weil,
Mm-hmm.
Weil, but it's pronounced Vile. And I
Yes.
didn't know that when I was watching the movie. So I thought it was just some kind of like a crazy coincidence that
Ah.
this guy who's like this, uh, yeah, like you mentioned, a puritanical literal witch hunter is one of the most vile characters I've seen,
For
especially
sure.
played by Peter Cushing.
Yeah.
And yeah, his last name kind of says it all. Contrast that with his loving wife, well, I'd say put upon wife, Katie
Yeah.
Vile, played magnificently by Kathleen Byron.
Yeah.
Um, he is constantly out looking for witches. I think that's sort of how the film opens. They've got this mob of like pilgrim looking dudes just going around burning people at the stake with these magnificent opening credits. There's this young woman who's being burned alive. Uh, it turns out their bigger problem is not witches, it's vampires.
Mm-hmm.
Because Baron Karnstein, in his lust for
He is a
power and his
count.
sort of
I
boredom,
have to correct you. He is a count.
he's a count. Oh,
Yep.
okay.
He's Count
So,
Karnstein.
all right. Well, thank you. I thought maybe someone else is a baron, or maybe I just watched this too early, as I tend to do.
It's okay.
But it's alliterative, kind of. Count
Yeah.
Karnstein, I like that.
Yeah.
But he he's doing a sacrifice, and he kind of, if I recall correctly, he sort of calls it off and sends all the purple robed people home. But he ends up stabbing the naked woman sprawled out on the slab himself. The blood drips down into this crypt, and all Hellraiser style resurrects Car Markala,
Makala, yeah.
who turns him into a vampire. He's alternately horrified and also, kind of obsessed with this idea. Now he's transcended to sort of the ultimate power. Um, Loves it, isn't really disturbed by the fact that he can't see himself in mirrors anymore, even though he's a really vain dude. But he sets his sights on young Frieda, or she sees him in town. Meanwhile, Maria gets enamored with Anton, who's a local school teacher, and has a sibling who also works in this school. So you got these parallel sort of teenage girl obsessions going on, both leading to very different paths. So let's kind of break into this. We'll set the table with, when did you see Twins of Evil, and what did you make of it when you first saw it? Because I was frankly knocked out by this movie, a bit bored in the middle, but by the end,
Mm.
completely captured by its spell.
Yeah, I dug this from the get-go. I think I probably saw it probably in the maybe like 20 years ago when I was doing my big kind of tour through Hammerland the first time around. I'd known about Vampire Lovers for a while, and then as I got into it, it was like, okay, here's Twins of Evil, here's Lust for a Vampire, and I mean I enjoyed it, and I think what I like about it is that kind of have two opposing forms of evil. We have, and that there's a nice kind of like play on the twinning, in that we have, evil in the form of our dark arts, our dark lord, our vampires, our servants of the devil. But then we also see that evil in the witch hunting, where they are so purportedly doing good by crushing out evil, but they're just killing innocent people, which is, which is exactly what the vampires do. So it's like we have two sources of wrongdoing, and they are up against each other, which is kind of like, to turn Gustav Weil into a hero. I think the film wisely kind of avoids that, even though he is fighting the vampires in the end. He does have a moment of clarity where he's like, oh, wait, I've been doing this wrong. And he turns to Anton, who turns out has a lot of knowledge about vampire hunting and vampire lore, and says, oh, you mean this burning we've been doing that actually wasn't okay? Great, thank you. What do we do again? Steak? Got it.
Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, I want to pull over and just ask about the kind of the rules of this, because Count Karnstein's walking around during the day.
Well, as did Carmilla in Vampire Lovers. The Karnsteins are able to walk around in the day. Like, their vampires are not affected by sunlight. They don't love it, but they are not killed by it.
That's, now you mentioned, I'm casting my mind back to January. Yep. I think I did ask you that very question. So yeah, thanks for refreshing me. But yeah, there is, I love the idea of the hypocrisy. I mean, was it Arthur Miller wrote The Crucible? I think it was in the 1950s. So this is not that long after that. I feel like this is almost not necessarily inspired by it, but definitely in that kind of zeitgeist of, kind of Puritanism. Also, you're wrapping in kind of the sexual revolution of, one thing that can denote a woman as being a witch is if she lives alone in the middle of the woods and has lots of boyfriends. Right. Heaven forbid.
Well, this is kind of following upon, there was Witchfinder General with Vincent Price in 1968. There's the one with Herbert Lom and Uta Kier, which I'm blanking on. I can't believe that I'm blanking on, but there's another witch hunt going on there. A Mark of the Devil, that's what it's called. So both of those were happening around like the turn of the 70s. So there was a bit of a witch hunting craze. I think Witch's Hammer came out around that same time. So the witch hunt was fresh in the minds of, and I think it was a commentary by the free-loving 60s folks who were kind of pushing back at these puritanical ideas and saying, like, we've been here before where you were trying to shut down all the sexual freedom, and look where it got us, folks.
Right. And you've got, I think it's a fair representation of a middle ground as well, embodied in the form of Gustav's wife, Katie, who I mentioned, because she sees, she's a very religious, kind of devout woman. I mean, she'd have to be to be married to a guy like Gustav, but she also loves her nieces that she sees as being, kind of troubled. They don't have their parents anymore, so she's trying to care for them, and she sees that they are not like bad people. Yes, Frieda is the kind of the troublemaker one, but that doesn't mean that she's in league with the devil. Right. Well, until she is.
Until she's like, you know what, that looks like fun.
Yeah, there's kind of a development that I didn't see coming. I probably should have, because any movie that has twins in the title or twins in the cast, I imagine they're going to do a body swap bit at some point. But this one I thought was particularly nasty. Yeah. Because when Frieda gets turned by Count Karnstein, she's all in. She's out there like stalking the woods, murdering people. I mean, she's going after. She seems to be targeting Gustav's crew. The other Puritans. Yeah. But she doesn't even care about her own sister's well-being anymore. Frieda gets locked up in the jail. The Count and his friends kind of like come for her by hypnotizing the jailer. They go to the cell to free her, and then they go to Maria's room and take her body and swap her back into the cell,
Right.
so that Frieda is going to allow her own sister to be burned at the stake. Wow.
Yep. Yeah. She definitely goes to the dark side pretty quickly. And I thought, I mean, I think that generates a fair amount of suspense. It's like, are they gonna, uncover it in time? There's also a kind of a nod to Mario Bava's Black Sunday, in that like racing to save the day at the end. David Warbeck, who I just want to do a quick shout out to, who plays Anton. He would later show up in several Italian horror films, including Lucio Fulci's The Beyond and The Black Cat, and a film called Craze, which is kind of an infection thriller. So you'll see him pop up quite a bit as you continue to explore the genre. But I'd forgotten that he was in this. I was like, oh, that's right. It's a young David Warbeck. Look at him go.
He reminded me of, was the character's name Rob in here's the reference, Friday the 13th, the final chapter. He was the guy out in the woods looking for his sister.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
He looks strikingly like him.
I could see that, sure.
I kind of thought of him as that character, except in a period piece, which is strange. But no, I mean, this, let's talk about our count for a second.
Sure.
It seems like whenever you stray off the Christopher Lee thing, you're kind of in dicey territory.
Yeah, of course. I think Damian Thomas does a pretty nice job as our evil count.
He does, but I mean, he's so big, and he's just so vampy, I guess.
Yeah.
Also, strangely, I think he looks like Jimmy Fallon in a vampire.
No, he does. He does look like Jimmy Fallon. That's true. I had seen him in Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger. He plays the evil Prince Kasim. And I was kind of like, oh, that's right. And here he is again. But yeah, I like him. I think he's kind of trapped by the fact that he's playing a character that like is all about the Satan, like he's looking to transcend these boring earthly pleasures, and he wants something that's bigger and better. And so like he does enjoy his libidinous life. And he's also kind of, as we got into later Hammer, we have the insto changeo vampirisms, where you get bit and instantly you have like an inch long fang like hanging out of your mouth. It's like, okay, that didn't take long at all. You don't have to die and be resurrected. Nope, you just get bit and boom. I also like the new bit of mythology they introduce here, where if you're evil, you turn into a vampire. If you're not evil, you just die.
Well, I was going to say that kind of makes sense, but on the other hand, it doesn't. Help me out with something. Do vampires want there to be more vampires?
I think it depends on the vampire. And I'm not being glib. I think that some vampires rather, or as, I love that we're talking about, I think, but I think that as we've seen in film and cinema, that some vampires are about building the family, and some of them are about protecting their own and keeping kind of the bubble, as it were, so that they, they know that they always have enough food and there isn't somebody who's going to mess it all up for everybody. I mean, I keep thinking like, Only Lovers Left Alive. Have you seen that? The Jim Jarmusch film? Like the sister comes in and just messes it up for everybody. They had everything all squared away.
I gotta watch that. That might be something to talk about next year, because I think that turns 10 as well. In 2023.
Yep, I think that's right. I think it's 2013. Yeah.
I think I saw that at the same Chicago International Film Festival where I saw Dario Argento's Dracula. Talk about a contrast. But no, I mean, like, I just wondered about that, because you said, if you're just kind of the way this movie pans out, if you're good, you die if you're attacked by a vampire, and if you're evil, you kind of come in league with them. Was Frieda evil, or was she just that spark of rebelliousness enough to kind of push her over? Because even though she was kind of annoyed with her sister because, Maria was not nearly as adventurous or willing to take risks, I don't see a pre-vampire Frieda turning Maria over to a raving mob to save her own skin.
I would hope not. At the same time, she was all about like, let's punish the peasant girl. She's like, yes, I think we should punish the peasant girl. So she definitely, I don't think she was a nice person. I think she was certainly, like you said, more rebellious. But like then again, if you look at like Dennis Price, who's the one who provides the sacrificial lamb that starts this whole chain of events, when Frieda, bites him in the forest, he doesn't turn into a vampire, and he certainly wasn't a very nice guy either.
Yeah. Oh, there's so many layers.
So, well, again, I think it's funny. Whenever I bust out, like whenever we're doing Hammerland, I bust out two of my favorites. So this is Nightwalkers by Bruce Lanier Wright, and the other one I always have readily available to me is The Hammer Story. Oh God, thank you, green screen. Okay, anyway, The Hammer Story by Marcus Hearn, and those are two of my resources I like to pull out. So, since Christmas is coming, Gothic horror movies by Bruce Lanier Wright and The Hammer Story by Marcus Hearn and Alan Barnes. And the reason I mention them is that as I was reading Bruce Lanier Wright's recap of Twins of Evil, he's like, and they introduced this really stupid bit of mythology where the evil people turn into vampires. And I was like, because he's like, what's terrifying about vampires is that you don't want your loved ones to turn into a vampire. Like vampirizing somebody who you loved and who was a good person, watching them turn into a servant of evil, that's, almost the biggest tragedy of it. If somebody who is evil then turns into a vampire, it's kind of like, okay, well, now he's just a jerk with more power.
And that's certainly the case with Mr. Karnstein. I mean,
Yeah.
this whole like vampire romance angle, we talked a bit about last week on the Scarathon live stream of Bram Stoker's Dracula. It just kind of gets kind of muddy when you start bringing the romance angle into it.
Mhm.
Interesting note, I was talking about The Cell, the Tarsem Singh movie
Oh,
starring
sure.
Jennifer Lopez, last night with Mark Krawczyk. And a bit of trivia, we found out the costume designer for The Cell also worked on Bram Stoker's Dracula,
Ah.
and the red muscle suit that Jennifer Lopez wears was the same muscle suit
Uh-huh.
prototype from Gary Oldman in the beginning of that movie. Because I made that remark, I'm like, that's a little bit too similar. Like, well, they had him in the trailer, I guess.
Exactly. Well, we're not going to not use this. I mean, come on, you can't say like, you got to use it again.
Yeah. But yeah, so Frieda, turns evil, and there's that whole like swap thing. There is a great bit where Anton goes to rescue Maria,
Mhm.
and they end up kind of struggling. This is where we see Frieda Maria in kind of all her glory, and there's this big struggle, a great burning of the cross in the hand,
Right.
the crucifix. Does she grab it, or she touches it in the struggle? I can't remember exactly how it happened.
I think he presses it against her hand.
That's right. Nice little kind of like a smoke effect in the scream.
Now, here's a question: is she perpetually like she can't look at her hand anymore until it heals?
I've never thought of this, but because we were talking again on Dracula last week
Yeah.
about how the reason vampires can't see themselves is because in mirrors, because mirrors are backed by silver.
Right.
We've seen in vampire lore vampires being repelled by a cross shape.
Right.
Sometimes it's kind of like jokey like this. A lot of it is you have to believe in what you're doing.
Right.
But that's an excellent question.
Or
Like,
windmills. Like I mean, and so yeah, I thought about that. I was like, oh man, she's in trouble now. She can't even like look at her own hand. She's gonna be looking at a cross all the time.
what? Right? And would that wound heal, or is it
Right.
just a permanent
Or you just
cross?
ruined.
I want to see that movie. I want to see the vampire. This sounds
Can't look at
almost
his
like
own
something
hand.
like what we do in the shadows, or something like the vampire who constantly has to wear a glove or can't look at
Right.
their hand because there's a
Well,
cross in it.
I just watched A Quiet Place Part 2 the other day, and I don't know if you've seen it, but like the creatures in it are very loud, and I'm kind of like, do they like make themselves crazy? Like when they yell, like when they scream, are they like, oh my god, that hurts so much? Oh, ow, that hurt again. It's like every time they're screaming in like anger, I'm like, that's got to be like hell on all their buddies around them. Like, dude, shut up.
I was thinking the same thing throughout that movie, but no.
Oh, dude, shut up. Yeah.
Um, just for the record, I was not a fan of Quiet Place Part 2. Huge fan of A Quiet Place Part 1.
Well, you'll be a
Um,
fan of our episode then.
I look forward to it.
Yeah.
So where was I? Oh, so Karnstein.
Yeah.
What I love is that, yeah, he's kind of, now that he's a vampire and he's bragging to Frieda about, how awesome it is to be a vampire. Like, we're going to live forever as long as we don't get our heads cut off and we avoid crosses. And I think a couple other things, no one can stop us.
Right.
And then in the end, when the crazy mob finally gets its act together and they're like, we've been fighting the wrong enemy this whole time, and they're
Hmm.
storming Castle Karnstein, he turns into a complete, kind of coward, and
Yeah.
he's running away. And it's great to see that fear on his face.
Although he does muscle up at the end, when he's got um, Maria as the human shield, and I mean I feel like he does a nice job of taunting until and he's facing off, head to head against Gustav, and nice throw from the ground floor by Anton. Nice job there, buddy. But what were your thoughts on Peter Cushing for this one? This was the first film his beloved wife Helen had just passed away 2 months prior, and this was the first film he had done since her passing. And I feel like it really does show up in his performance. Like, he is darker and meaner. He's almost darker than Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed.
Well, I was going to say, like, we talked about Dracula AD 1972 last year,
Right.
and that was the year after this. And I think in that episode, you'd mentioned that his wife had recently passed away.
Right.
Because I had said something about he looked really kind of old and tired in that
Yeah.
role, and
Yeah.
I kind of understand why because of the context. But it makes sense that this is immediately after, because I think it's a brilliant performance, I think, but also a very kind of sad one,
Yeah.
because you almost get the feeling that he is legitimately, he's not a hypocrite in the sense that a lot of these types of people tend to be.
Right.
They're
Yes.
overly
Yeah.
religious and they're chastising everybody, and yet they've got a sex dungeon in the barn.
Right. When he's
Um,
not looking for like a lot of the witch hunting was in service of like getting other people's property and getting them out of the way, getting troublemakers out of the way. Like, I think he actually believes in what he's doing. He thinks, if there is a woman alone in the woods, she is a witch and she's a servant of the devil, and she has to be, wiped out.
right, and there's not that I can remember anyway, there's never a sense of glee on his face. I
Right.
mean, there is some excitement among the rest of the crowd when
Sure.
these, huntings are going on and things like
Right.
that. But he always seems kind of sad, like, I'm sorry it came to this, because you
Yeah.
are a child of God, but you made the wrong decision, and this is the only way that we can, put things right and save the world. Uh, and when it comes to his own nieces,
Right.
he's upset that they're going down this path, and especially when it turns out that he's going to have to put one of them to death, for the Lord. He's got some really great conversations with his wife, and in those moments, I really did feel like, my gosh, I'm Peter Cushing. I kept wanting to say Christopher Lee, but that's wrong character. That Peter Cushing and Kathleen Byron were having some real, like, I felt like I was watching a real couple trying to work real things out. Like, forget
Hmm.
that this is a horror movie. This could be just a great relationship drama about a husband who believes in something so much, and his wife is just like, I want to help you, but I just can't because your obsession is getting in the way of our marriage.
I feel like there's something really kind of great about what Anton says, because the Count is protected by the Holy Emperor of Rome.
Yeah.
And there's something Anton says where he's like, oh, it's really easy to go out and like pluck, women living alone and put them to the stake. But when you have somebody before you that is actually evil, just because he's protected by the Holy Emperor, you don't do your sacred duty. He's like, are you going to do your sacred duty or not? And they all kind
And
of like realize that, yeah, we even though it may cost us, we have to do the right thing here.
and that goes back to, what we know of the Salem witch trials and even the Crucible,
Right.
which is, it was fine for the teenage girls, in the village to rat each other out and sell out anybody they didn't like as being a witch. But when it came to the authority figures, like the
Right.
the constable, whoever comes to
The
town, like,
judges.
your
Yeah.
wife was looking at us funny, she might be a witch. Like,
Right.
no, she's not. You're wrong.
Right.
Point that Put that
Well,
Ouija board the other way.
and you also have that really great scene where Gustav comes to visit Anton and he says, you lodged a complaint against the Brotherhood, and they in turn have asked me to investigate you. And you just like go, oh boy. But he doesn't just condemn Anton. He doesn't go, you've caused trouble for me and therefore I'm going to eliminate you. He says, take care. He says, I don't want to have to play this card, but I have the winning card all the time. Just be aware. One quick question I do have to ask, though, is they talk about these. I mean, the reason why they're killing these girls, burning them at the stake, is that there are these murders happening. People are disappearing. And I have to ask, who was doing that? Because Mircalla had not been resurrected yet. The Count had not been vampirized yet. We don't get the sense, we get the sense that the girls were not actually being killed when Dennis Price brings them for, the Count's entertainment. So it's like, who's doing all this murdering in the first place?
Were the murders specifically, were the victims found with like puncture wounds?
They
or they were
don't
just
say
alluded
that.
to as the
They
murders?
just say that there are murders, that there are disappearances and murders.
See, that almost adds another fun layer to it, is like you got the Puritans hunting the witches.
Right.
You've got the vampires emerging as this side threat they're not paying attention to, and nobody's paying attention to the serial killer on
the actual serial killer in their midst. Yeah.
That'd be a horrible like postscript to this. Everyone goes home, Maria is tucked safely in her bed, and all of a sudden Jack the Ripper bursts in through the window.
Well, yeah, it makes me think like, okay, you could do like a werewolf movie where there's actually a serial killer running around, or a vampire movie there is a serial killer running around. I don't know if that's been done. I think we should, though.
I think so too. And not like one of those things where the serial killer becomes a vampire or something. No, they're just two completely
separate things. And you find, well, I feel like maybe one of the giallos that we did, like they catch the serial killer, right? Don't they catch a serial killer in the middle of the movie, and you're like, oh, well, that kind of resolves things. And then you find out, oh no, this guy was using the serial killer to mask his own crimes.
Yes. I don't remember which movie that was.
I think it's Strange Vice of Mrs. Ward.
Probably, yeah.
Because I do remember like halfway through that movie, you go, oh, wait, you can't just solve the murder in the middle of the movie or solve the crime.
Oh, I was going to say something and I completely forgot it.
I'm sorry. I went off on a tangent.
No, it's good. It was a fun tangent, but now I've got a splinter in my brain and now I gotta pick it out. I don't know. So tell me, what have you seen? How many times have you seen this movie?
I've seen this one a few times. John Huff directed it, and he's one of my faves as far as genre directors. He also did Legend of Hell House. He directed the two Witch Mountain movies from the 70s for Disney. And he also directed Dirty Mary, Crazy Larry, which is a great fun like chase movie from the early 70s. He also unfortunately directed Howling 4, the original Nightmare, which is really, really terrible. It's like basically a remake of the original Howling. It's more, quote, faithful to Gary Brandner's novel, but it's a crap movie. He also did The Watcher in the Woods for Disney as well.
I don't think I saw that one.
Lynn Holly Johnson, Betty Davis.
No. I don't doubt that you're telling the truth, but yes. But has the movie changed in your estimation, or has your appreciation of it changed, or have you learned anything more from subsequent viewings?
Boy, I would say probably what I've learned is that I really enjoy coming back to these films. I felt like I've seen this, probably like 5 or 6 times at this point. I was kind of like, I could probably just roll into this one. I've watched a lot of movies in October. I don't know if I'm gonna have time to get to this one, but I feel like I could speak to it. And I'm really glad I busted it out again, because watching, the duality of the two evils, the puritanical witch hunters and the vampires, that really kind of like sang out to me this time around. And I'd completely forgotten about the old Tale of Two Cities switcheroo. with the twins. I was like, oh, that's right, that's right. He goes and sticks her in the jail and puts her in the bedroom, and everything's gonna be fine.
Well, yeah, this is one, and I made the mistake again of, renting the movie when I should have just, bought the Blu-ray, because
Mm.
it seems like every time we talk about one of these things, I'm still waiting for like the clunker. Like I regret having even put this, on. But yeah, I'm gonna definitely add this to my collection. But you asked me about Peter Cushing a bit
Yeah.
ago. It's fascinating because like he's played, in the last couple of years when you're talking about movies he's been in, he's played, Victor Frankenstein, he's played Van Helsing, and now he's played this Gustav Weil, and yet there's not ever a sense, even when he's playing the same character, but especially here, it's not,
Mm.
oh, it's Peter Cushing
Right.
playing a Puritan, but he's just doing his Van Helsing
Right.
shtick.
Yeah.
He creates these fully fleshed out characters that you feel like have been walking around for 65 years, and we're just catching up with them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
He's very, I
it's
mean,
quite
that's kind
remarkable.
of the magic of Cushing, is that he always feels very authentic. And I think like kind of the magic for Vincent Price is that it always seems like he's enjoying himself. And like there are these kind of the reasons why these icons became icons in the first place, is that, I think Lee is always just has such a presence, so there's a reason why the legends become legends.
Yeah, and I don't, that's the thing, is I never get the feeling that Peter Cushing is enjoying himself in these movies because he's so either tortured or methodical or just mad.
Right.
I don't doubt that he loved what he did. And I love that, an actor of his caliber kind of devoted his career to the genre and never, from what I understand, never treated as like, I got to make this so I can actually, survive in order to make real pictures.
Right, right. Well, suppose to Lee, who was like, I'm going to make money and I'm going to put it away over here in my, offshore bank account.
Um, yeah, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention it was a surprise to me, Frieda's demise.
Hmm.
I thought is a lot of these movies, there's that whole thing of like, okay, there's the person who's been turned into a vampire, but they're still a young vampire. So if you can take out the head vamp, then their soul can be, redeemed and they can turn back. No, she
Mhm.
gets straight up beheaded.
Yeah, right.
Rather
And like
horrifically too.
and it's yeah, it's a genuine surprise. Like, he just Cushing rolls in and just like kablam. And I was like, oh, that's okay. That's right. There's no saving here. I did want
And
to comment on sorry, did you have more you wanted to add to
no,
that?
no, go ahead.
I did want to comment on the score, because I feel like the score feels very different than some of our other Hammer scores by uh, no, not Bernard Robinson. But anyway, that one guy who does all the scores. But today we have Harry Robertson, and I felt like there was kind of like an Ennio Morricone feel to it. Like there was almost like a Western, spaghetti Western feel to it, with the horns and just kind of like the rising quality to it. I don't know why, but I was watching it this morning and just like going, yeah, this like reminds me of a spaghetti Western. I looked up and I mean, I don't recognize a ton of the credits that Mr. Robertson worked on, but I do like his work here.
Yeah, it's very good. I mean, I liked pretty much everything about this movie. What I said, I was kind of bored in the middle. Uh, it is very much about the people and the times they're living in, and these kind of like these dramas of, trying to figure each other out and who's evil and who's good, and all of this stuff. Plus, again, 4 o'clock in the morning, not the best time to be watching something that isn't just like nonstop blood and guts.
Right.
But I think I'll appreciate it a lot more on second time around. But yeah, that switcheroo again may be obvious to a lot of people, but it really knocked me out because Frieda just did not. She left all of her humanity and was willing to sell out her sister. I was just hoping that they were going to rescue Maria in time, because
Mm.
I think they did. Were there 2 or 3 stake burnings in this movie before
Well,
hers?
we see three witch burnings. Yeah.
Okay. Um, then I guess it wouldn't have
And they
violated. It
were
would have
getting ready
violated
to
the rule
they
of
were getting
3.
ready to do a fourth. Yeah. So
Yeah. So I guess that was the big tell. If you've burned 3 witches at the stake already, the fourth one's going to be fine. She's going to get rescued. If it had been 2,
that's
and they had
right.
just like gone through with it, I mean, how amazing would that have been? Um, a much darker tragedy, even more so than Maria being attacked by Jack the Ripper after the smoke clears. But imagine Frieda getting beheaded in the castle siege, but having that castle siege happen only after Maria was mistakenly put to the burnt at the stake, and then you have no twins of evil at the end, and everyone's like, "Oh, I guess we were all wrong. Sorry."
Well, we have, it's funny you mentioned Jack the Ripper, because our next month's feature is going to be Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde, which features a kind of Jack the Ripper type subplot in there. So I think you'll enjoy that.
Okay. Well, you beat me to it, because I was going to ask what we're talking about next month.
I know. I saw it, the twinkle in your eye. I'm like, wait, I know the answer to this one.
Well, thank you for digging that up, and in record time too. But so any closing thoughts on Twins of Evil?
I think, I mean, I love Vampire Lovers, and it will probably always be my favorite of the Karnstein trilogy slash quadrilogy, tetralogy. But and Vampire Lovers may also be, among my favorite non-Dracula vampire films. But I love Twins of Evil as a film. Like, I think it's a really solid movie, not even necessarily a vampire movie. I love that we've got this introduction of these witch hunters and the whole like howling mob. Even though there are a few kind of inconsistencies going on, I like the fact that we have, evil versus evil, basically. And then somewhere a glimmer of good is able to turn one side into good, at least to defeat the greater evil.
Right. And you've got, it's interesting. This almost could have been another subplot, or just an idea to explore, because we've established that Gustav, as far as we understand it, is a believer in God. So is Maria. She is like a devout, Catholic or whatever that was. What is it, along that path between the 19-year-old girl and the 65-year-old man, or however he's supposed to be, that twists that, pure faith and belief in goodness into something so horrible? Is there a world in which Maria would have grown up to be, if not Gustav, then maybe a Katie who marries a Gustav?
Right. Well, what is the darkness that Gustav Weil is trying to wipe out? Like, we don't get any mention of like, a tragedy in his life. But this is clearly a wounded person.
Yeah, especially at the end, where he's mortally wounded. I think,
and nobody dies like Peter Cushing.
No, they really don't. It's a great, I think, tragic end, because he kind of gets a hero's death, even though he's a completely compromised, antagonist through most of the film. And I attribute this to Cushing, his 0-hour kind of change of conscience. It doesn't excuse what he did to all those innocent people, but at least I believe that he is sufficiently horrified and wants to do everything he can to set things right.
It feels authentic. That's right. And yes, all credit to Cushing.
Yeah. All right. Well, all credit to us. We've made it through 10 months so far of Son of Hammerland. We're going to keep rolling right on through this this darkened, eerie country with next month's Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde, you said?
That's right. We will have Ralph Bates and Martine Beswick, two Hammer faves, both returning to the fold. And I think both of them give great performances.
Excellent. Well, I'm excited about this. Now, this is not officially part of Scarathon 2022, but I do want to mention that we are doing Scarathon 2022 as far as like the live streams and stuff on Friday. So this episode is going up tonight, so Wednesday, the 26th. So folks can join us on Friday the 28th. We're going to be talking about Poltergeist from 1982. Lots of stuff to cover there. And we are, as always, every October, we're doing these live streams in service of a great cause. So, AC, you want to tell us a little bit about WRAP?
Sure. It's a Women Reproductive Rights Assistance Project, and they provide financial assistance for women who are unable to afford safe, legal abortions and emergency contraceptives. And yes, please tune in on Friday. That'll be our final Friday Night Fright live stream, where we give our last hurrah to try to raise as much money as possible for the Women's Reproductive Rights Assistance Project. Look forward to seeing y'all there.
And also, I forgot this until like yesterday, but we're going to be doing another live stream on Sunday.
That's right. We're doing the Giallo.
Accademia Giallo a very interesting sounding film, Watch Me When I Kill. So yeah,
as opposed to
but
turning your eyes away.
that was the sequel that never
Yeah.
got made. But AC, thanks again as always. Folks, definitely check out Aaron Christensen's work at Horror 101 with Dr. AC .blogspot.com. Links down below in the description. And yeah, stay spooky. Thanks, AC, and I'll talk to you real soon. We've got like a billion podcasts coming out in the last closing days of October. It's crazy. We should just move in together.
It's a great, it's going to be a great week. Looking forward to it.
All right, man. Take it easy.
Bye now.
Bye.